Late afternoon in Atlanta passed under the pale yellow lights of the Fulton County Courthouse. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was far from peaceful. This was not an ordinary trial. It was the setting for a silent confrontation about to erupt between power and justice. Madeline Brooks, a 45-year-old black woman, newly appointed as the city's police chief, entered with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. She wore a neat black suit, showing no fear despite knowing she was being watched closely. Outside the door, Officer Ethan Cole, a 40-year-old white man with a history of aggressive behavior toward people of color, was waiting. His gaze was cold, full of suspicion, not because of the work, but because of a rigid belief that people like her shouldn't have power. As Madeline stepped out of the courthouse, Ethan quickly moved forward, cutting her off unmistakably. "Show me your vehicle papers and tell me why you're here," he said in a commanding tone. Madeline stopped, calmly pulling out her documents. "This is my car, and I'm the police chief." Ethan just smirked, unconvinced. He didn't look at the papers. He stared directly at her as if challenging her. "I'll need your cooperation." That was the moment when the tension began to rise. The difference wasn't just about skin color. It was about power, justice, and a story that had never been properly told. Can you feel it? The feeling of someone facing a challenge they cannot back down from, yet cannot be broken by. Madeline was not just a black woman in a suit. She was a symbol of change. And this time, on the way out of the courthouse, she would not let anyone, even those in uniform, diminish her worth. The story begins here. And you get ready to hear a confrontation without gunfire, but heavy with truth and courage. Before we dive into the main story, comment below and tell us where you are listening to this story from and what time it is, so we know how far this story has spread and who it has touched. Now let's begin. Atlanta, a vast and vibrant city, but for Madeline Brooks, it was also the memory of a childhood full of hardship. Born and raised in a poor neighborhood in the south of the city, where streets had never been paved smoothly and streetlights often went out abruptly, like the lives of forgotten dreams. Madeline was not born into luxury. Her father, James Brooks, was a carpenter with rough hands, but always held tightly onto an old law book whenever he came home. Her mother, Lillian, was a devoted nurse working both day and night shifts to make sure the children lacked nothing, even though they lived in cramped small rooms. From a young age, Madeline witnessed injustice all around her. One day when she was just 10, she stood by the window watching a black neighbor being stopped and questioned by the police simply because of the smell of blackness on the street. "I don't understand why they treat him like that," the little girl asked her father at dinner. James looked at his young daughter, eyes full of exhaustion but firm with determination. "Sweetheart, it's not because he did something wrong, but because fear and prejudice blind them. But if one day you stand in a position of power, you will change that." Her father's words burned quietly like a fire in Madeline's heart. She silently promised she would not let that injustice happen again. Growing up in an environment full of barriers, Madeline had to learn to be tougher than anyone else. She studied hard, earning a scholarship to the prestigious Emory University School of Law. There, Madeline didn't just study law, she learned how to fight with knowledge and patience. In the classroom, she was the only person of color forced to endure curious stares, thoughtless comments, and sometimes hidden contempt. Once during a discussion session, when she mentioned the issue of racial discrimination in the justice system, a white classmate glanced at her and said, "You're probably just being too sensitive." Madeline didn't respond, only smiled lightly. "That's because you haven't lived in my circumstances." Outside of class, she joined groups advocating for police reform and social justice. Night meetings, peaceful protests, and even times when she was temporarily detained by the police forged in her an unshakable resilience. After graduating, Madeline decided not to become a lawyer. She wanted to change things from within, so she joined the Atlanta City Police Force. At first, she had to endure suspicion and even hostility from colleagues. Many didn't believe a black person could do their job well. One colleague once said to her, "Madeline, you're not like them. You won't last long." But she didn't let those words discourage her. She worked harder, learning more about management, leadership, and crisis handling. At age 38, she became the first black female police chief in Atlanta, something both she and the community were proud of. But this position also placed her amidst many challenges, not only from outside, but also from within the force, where old prejudices still quietly persisted. One afternoon at the office, as Madeline was preparing for a meeting, an employee came to report, "Boss, some officers are talking badly about you." She smiled, her eyes firm. "They can say whatever they want. I'm not here to please everyone. I'm here to do what's right." And that was the spirit Madeline carried in every step, especially when facing today's tense event at the courthouse. You see, Madeline's story is not just a personal journey. It is proof of the power of will, of perseverance against prejudice and faith in justice, no matter how many challenges lie ahead. And in that tense moment when Officer Ethan Cole stood before her, she was not just a police chief. She was the voice of the millions who had been forgotten. Keep listening, because the story is far from over, and there is much more to tell. Ethan Cole stood under the dim yellow glow of Atlanta's streetlights, his steps steady on the rough sidewalk. He was a veteran city police officer with over 15 years on the front lines. In the early days, Ethan entered the force with a simple belief: control is necessary to keep the city safe. But time taught him that power was not just a tool, but also a burden. From the start, Ethan did not hesitate to get rough with those he considered dangerous. Once he stopped a young black man just because of his hairstyle and inappropriate way of speaking. The result was a complaint filed with Internal Affairs, abuse of power, and discriminatory attitude. But Internal Affairs had never actually punished anyone. Broken cameras, inconsistent testimonies, and colleagues defending him to the end. Ethan learned to live with suspicious looks. This is the job. You can't let anyone control you. He once told teammates during a night shift, if people behave normally, there's nothing to worry about. If not, we have to make them know who's in charge. Work pressure tortured him, not only from criminals, but also from the system itself. Every day he faced expectations to be efficient, to be firm. Otherwise, the consequences were rumors, loss of favor from superiors, even loss of position. One spring morning in a small meeting room at the police department, Ethan looked around at his colleagues' faces. The topic that day was adjusting attitudes and behaviors in citizen interactions. But Ethan didn't believe in those things. He stood up, voice cold. "I disagree. If we're weak, criminals will take over. People need to be controlled. Power is not to be shared, but to be kept." The commander nodded lightly. "You have a point, Ethan, but remember, all actions must be within the law." Ethan nodded as if to please, but kept his own thoughts inside. When asked about accusations of racial discrimination, he shrugged. "I'm not discriminatory. I'm just doing my job. If someone feels it's unfair, they should look at their own behavior." That was the usual answer, a sentimental justification of justice, where he used personal biases to excuse his actions. Colleagues saw Ethan as a tough leader, but also a hard man to approach. One teammate once said, "He believes in total control, but rarely listens." Ethan once retorted, "Listen when your life and your team's lives are always under threat. You can't just sit and wait for things to happen." The truth was, Ethan was trapped in a system of strong internal protection where friends shielded each other and complaints were just hopeless echoes. That meant he never really knew his true limits. And every time he crossed the line, he was forgiven, protected. And now, standing in front of Madeline Brooks, the newly appointed police chief, Ethan felt a different kind of pressure. Not from work or colleagues, but from a black woman with determined eyes and sharp legal knowledge. He couldn't use old control tactics to impose on her, but instinct and bias still made him suspicious. He had to keep his position of power, but also face the inevitable change. Do you see, this is not just the story of a police officer? It is a story about the limits within the human heart, about the internal struggle between power and justice, between conservatism and change. Ethan Cole is not only Madeline's opponent today, he is a symbol of a system under challenge. And their story starting here will make you rethink power, responsibility, and fairness. Let's keep listening. Madeline's shiny black car rolled along the gravel road leading to the courthouse front yard. Everything seemed normal until Ethan Cole turned on his flashing lights behind her. He lightly honked and signaled her to pull over. Madeline calmly stopped the car. There was no sign of any traffic violation. When Ethan approached, he asked in an authoritative tone, "Show me your vehicle registration and driver's license." Madeline didn't hesitate, calmly handing over the registration, driver's license, and her badge. All were in order. Correct name, correct person. Yet Ethan was still unsatisfied. He glanced at the papers briefly, then folded them, not returning them, but looking straight into her eyes. I have a feeling this car doesn't belong to you. Maybe it's a rental being misused. Madeline frowned, her voice calm, not angry. This is my car. I bought it over a year ago. You can check the system if you want. Ethan sighed, his tone carrying a hint of resentment. Feelings are what I rely on when I need to make quick decisions. Papers can be forged. That answer was more than just words. It was a reflection of a long-existing phenomenon. Biased policing, police acting on unconscious prejudice rather than evidence. He believed because Madeline was a black woman, wore glasses and a black suit, she couldn't really own the luxury car. He thought her image didn't fit the expensive vehicle. This exposed a painful truth. Decisions and actions of law enforcers are not always guided by law, but often by deep subconscious biases they don't even realize themselves. Madeline looked straight at Ethan, her voice sharper. I am the newly appointed police chief. I am not someone you should doubt. Work according to the law, not on feelings. Ethan frowned, trying to hide his embarrassment, but his eyes revealed his displeasure. I have the right to verify further if necessary. But around them, the eyes of bystanders gradually focused. A few people took out their phones preparing to record. Madeline didn't rush. She remained calm, knowing this was not just a traffic stop. This was a silent struggle between power and justice, between prejudice and truth. Inside, Ethan felt a new pressure. Not just from the bottom, but from a new generation, those who were not easily subdued by old power. He was forced to face a choice: continue wielding power based on prejudice, or accept change so the law could be truly respected. Madeline opened her car door and stepped out with a confident stride. She said something that made Ethan pause. I will not leave until my rights are respected. The crowd began to murmur. A young man's camera started recording. A new story, a story of resilience, of justice, was being written right in the heart of the city. And you, the one listening here, remember this. Power is not always right, and papers are not always the truth. What matters is fairness, respect, and a view not warped by deep-seated prejudice. The story is still ahead. Do you want to know what happens next? The atmosphere around the courthouse began to change noticeably. At first, just a few passers-by looked on with curiosity, but when someone shouted, "That's Chief Brooks," the small group suddenly gathered. A young law student holding a new phone, voice excited, stepped closer. Yes, that's the newly appointed police chief. I attended her talk last week. She's very strong and determined. Others began to pull out their phones, eyes shining with unmistakable interest. Clicking sounds, camera shutters filled the air rapidly. A middle-aged man who had witnessed many incidents but this time couldn't hide his frustration said in a low voice, "This kind of thing isn't isolated anymore. Now everyone has a camera in hand and everything can be recorded." A black woman standing nearby holding a small camera whispered, "This is the power of the community. When people become witnesses, they cannot be silenced. That's the power of social media and public cameras." Ethan Cole, standing right next to Madeline, clearly felt the shift in the atmosphere. The pressure from outside seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at Nguyen, the Asian support officer, and thought silently, "Have I lost control?" Lin looked at him, eyes worried but calm. "Stay calm, Ethan. We're no longer the only ones controlling the story." The video of the incident quickly uploaded to social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Within hours, it attracted hundreds of thousands of views. Hashtags like #Justice for Brooks and #Atlanta Policing spread everywhere, drawing the attention of many social organizations and human rights activists. Local news ran headlines, "Public cameras, the new weapon in the fight for social justice." In-depth analysis emphasized the role of social media in changing how people view and oversee the police force. This was no longer just a personal confrontation between two people. It became a symbol of a larger movement. Those standing outside the courthouse were not just spectators, but guardians of justice by recording the truth. And every gaze, every phone raised, became a shield protecting Madeline and those like her. Do you know true power isn't just in the authority one holds? It lies in the community's ability to rise, observe, record, and speak out. When justice is illuminated by the light of transparency, there's no place for wrongdoing to hide in the shadows. In this moment, Ethan understood that he could no longer control everything the old way, and Madeline knew she was not alone. The story continues, but the power of truth and community has been awakened. You are listening and you are part of that story. Follow along with me to keep discovering what happens next. The dim street lights cast shadows on the tense faces gathered around the courthouse. The atmosphere heated as Ethan Cole remained firm, but a presence emerged like a cool breeze, a gentleness amid the rising tension. Officer Linh Nguyen, an Asian woman newly assigned to the local patrol unit, was not the first to step up to support, but she was the only one who could make a difference right now. Lynn approached slowly, measured, but confident. Her eyes showed no hostility, only understanding and respect. "Ethan, I'm here to support you. Stay calm and handle this by the book," her voice gentle yet firm. Ethan turned slightly surprised, but couldn't deny Lynn's presence eased the tension. Madeline noticed Lynn too, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Hello, I'm Chief Brooks. Thank you for coming." Madeline's voice was warm but resolute. Lynn nodded, a slight smile on her lips. "I know this job isn't easy, but we all have a duty to protect justice." She turned to Ethan quietly but seriously. "We're being watched. Everything we do is being recorded. Let's do the right thing." Lynn wasn't just there to mediate. She represented the good element in a system full of flaws. She knew the police force's conservatism well, knowing sometimes she had to stand against not just outsiders, but colleagues who defended old habits and wrong ways. For Lynn had tried many times to change the approach within the team. Once she proposed a new training program on cultural diversity and reducing implicit bias. "We can't keep handling things with a narrow view," she said to officers in a meeting. But the response was far from positive. Some stayed silent, others pushed back. "We've been doing it this way for years. Why change now?" Lynn understood that change doesn't come in a day. It comes in small steps and the right choices in each situation. And now in this confrontation outside the courthouse, she chose to use calmness and respect as a bridge. Madeline and Lynn exchanged empathetic glances. Two women each with her own story, her own fight, but the same purpose, fairness, and respect for the law. Ethan felt it too. Pressure weighed heavy, but there was also awakening. Lynn gently addressed Ethan. "You've served a long time. I understand your pressure, but don't let pressure cloud justice." Ethan sighed, nodded slightly. That was the first moment he paused and reflected on himself. Around them, the crowd kept filming, capturing every move. But the tense atmosphere softened somewhat. Lynn knew she couldn't solve everything right then, but at least she planted a seed for change. Do you see, not everyone in the system wants to maintain injustice. There are people like Lynn who know the difficulties, who know the risks, but still choose to stand on the right side. And sometimes just one person who knows when to pause, one person who knows how to calm, is enough to change the course. The story isn't over yet. And the power of calmness, of respect, will continue to resonate in the steps ahead. Stay tuned to hear what happens next, where everything begins to change or collapse. Under the dim glow of streetlights, the atmosphere around Atlanta's courthouse grew heavy and stifling, like a storm was about to break. Ethan Cole stood before Madeline Brooks, his eyes burning with an uncontrollable anger. Madeline, still firm inside her black car, looked straight at him, her voice calm but resolute. "I will not leave the vehicle without a clear legal reason." Her words were a subtle challenge, but to Ethan they felt like a blow to his already fragile pride. "You must cooperate right now," Ethan said more angrily, stepping closer to the car door. Madeline said nothing more. She remained calm, her eyes never leaving his. The silence stretched thick with tension, then in a burst of anger, Ethan could no longer restrain himself. He reached for the car door and with a swift motion touched Madeline's wrist. The touch was neither hard nor a yank, but enough to cross the final boundary. The crowd around erupted. "Don't touch her." He just touched her. "Everyone back up. It's being recorded." Shouts rang out, rapid and full of outrage and frustration. Immediately, Nguyen rushed forward, her steps decisive like a soldier defending justice. Ethan let go immediately. She shouted, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. Ethan was startled, stepped back hesitant before Lynn's determination. "You crossed the line, Ethan." Lynn stared him down, merciless. Madeline didn't pull her hand from the car door. Her eyes were no longer calm, but held a silent fury she could not hide. I can't believe a police officer could behave like that right in front of so many witnesses. The crowd continued recording, the clicking of cameras and phones relentless. Madeline spoke gently but clearly. I request a formal report on this behavior, and I will not leave until this matter is clarified. Ethan stood still, face flushed, unable to respond. He realized his action was not only a personal mistake, but a stain on his career and honor. That seemingly small touch was the spark that ignited a much larger story. A boundary that police must never cross. A threshold anyone in power must ask themselves whether to cross or not. And when that boundary is broken, resistance comes not only from the victim, but from the community, from people exhausted by injustice. Do you hear the shouts, the camera clicks, the breaking hearts? This is not just a single event. It is the cry of justice screaming out and a warning to all those who hold power. The story does not end here. Stay with me to see the reactions of those involved and the consequences of a touch that sparked a storm of change. Madeline took a deep breath, eyes fixed on Ethan Cole, the man who had just touched her. Not in anger, but to kindle the inner strength of resilience. Her voice was gentle but sharp. Do you know, Ethan, your actions just violated the Fourth Amendment? The crowd's gaze shifted toward her, curious and a little surprised. Madeline continued, each word clear. This amendment protects every citizen's right against unreasonable searches and seizures. You have no right to touch me when I have posed no threat and have provided all valid documents. A young man in the crowd raised his phone, recording every word. A young woman whispered, "She's right. Everything must be recorded." Madeline reminded gently, "I encourage everyone to keep recording and filming. All evidence will be used when necessary." She pulled out her phone, quickly calling her lawyer, Lisa. "I am being unlawfully detained. There are about 20 witnesses recording this. I need immediate support." A voice came through the line. "I'm on my way. Stay calm." Ethan Cole stood there, face flushed, unable to reply. He felt the silent power radiating from the woman before him. Madeline wielded not brute force, but the power of knowledge. The power of citizen rights protected by law. You know, knowing your rights is not always easy, but it's the strongest shield you can carry every time you step outside. Madeline is living proof of that. She didn't shout. She didn't struggle. She just stood there firm with knowledge and confidence. Her story is a reminder to all of us that no matter who you are, where you are, or how much power you hold, understanding and using your rights is the most effective way to protect yourself. Around them, camera shutters continued clicking, capturing every moment. People began speaking up, asking questions, discussing, "Is this how we keep justice alive? If it weren't for people like her, who would protect us?" Madeline looked around, her gaze softening but still resolute. She knew this was not just a personal confrontation. It was a turning point in the fight against abuse of power. You listening to this story, remember that strength doesn't come only from external power. It comes from knowledge, understanding, and the courage to stand up. The story doesn't end here. Join me as we continue to explore what happens next, where the power of justice begins to prove itself through community action. Right after the incident at the courthouse, videos showing Ethan Cole touching Madeline Brooks, and her strong response quickly spread across social media platforms. Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. Within hours, the clip went viral. Hundreds of thousands of views, shares, and comments, turning the story from a small corner of Atlanta into a nationwide hot topic. A simple hashtag, justice for Brooks, but its power was anything but small. Major news outlets like CNN, NBC, Fox News all covered and analyzed the event. Live commentators said Madeline Brooks' story has once again forced American public opinion to reconsider the police's attitude toward Black communities. Online forums split sharply into two camps. One side supported Madeline, praising her as a symbol of change, justice, and courage. Finally, someone is standing up against abuse of power. Madeline isn't just a police chief, she's a hero. The other side criticized, saying Madeline was arrogant and disrespectful to police authority. She's overreacting, creating unnecessary tension. Ethan was just doing his job. People should understand. On street corners, in cafes, even in offices, debates grew heated. A young female university student shared, This is the first time I've seen a police officer clearly recorded like this, and seen a black woman dare to stand up without fear. In contrast, a middle-aged man in a nearby bar shook his head. Stressful police work is normal. We need them to maintain order. That division reflects a much larger social picture, where views on justice and power are always split by experience and life circumstances. Social activists quickly organized peaceful protests demanding transparency and police reform. Meanwhile, many groups called for respect for police, emphasizing the dangers and mental pressures they face. Meanwhile, at the Atlanta Police Department, Ethan Cole was suspended pending investigation. An official statement was sent to the media. We take all misconduct allegations seriously and commit to transparency during the investigation process. Ethan's colleagues were divided, some silent, some supportive, but none dared to speak out publicly with strong voices. Madeline received many interview requests, but chose to speak cautiously. I'm not doing this for fame. I do it out of responsibility and truth. Do you see the power of social media? When justice is brought to light, when the oppressed have a chance to speak out, change begins. But at the same time, division and debate are inevitable, because society is always a complex picture, and justice is not simply a matter of right or wrong. The story of Madeline and Ethan opens a new chapter, one in which each of us can participate by listening, reflecting, and acting. Stay with me to continue exploring the next developments, where truth will gradually unfold and justice will be tested more fiercely than ever. Madeline Brooks stood in her office looking out the window with a deep, somber gaze. She remembered a summer day nearly 30 years ago when she was just 16, driving her father's old car with her best friend Emily, a white girl with a radiant smile and innocent eyes. The two girls had just left an ice cream shop, laughter ringing out under a clear blue sky. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared behind them, and police sirens sounded like an alarm. "Pull over immediately," came the harsh voice from the police car. Madeline didn't understand what was happening. What had they done wrong? When they stopped, two officers approached, their eyes suspicious and distrustful. "Show your registration and license," one demanded. Madeline handed over the documents, all in order. But the next question stunned the 16-year-old girl. "Do you know who you're driving with? Are you sure this person isn't being coerced?" Emily looked at Madeline, surprised and worried. "I'm her friend. We're just hanging out." Madeline tried to explain, but her soft voice wasn't convincing enough. The officers continued to scrutinize them, their looks full of doubt and hostility. "We're just doing our job." Madeline and Emily were held for a while as passers-by stopped curiously. At that time, Madeline didn't fully understand what was happening, only feeling a deep shame and injustice flooding her heart. After being released, Madeline went home, eyes red, mind full of questions. She told her father, James Brooks, the man who taught her to stand up for what is right. "I understand now, Dad," Madeline said, her voice choking with emotion. "Not everyone is treated fairly, even when they follow the law." James took his daughter's hand, eyes full of resolve. "You must become the one to change that. Not with violence, but with understanding and justice." His words burned like a quiet flame in Madeline's heart. From that moment, she was determined to work in law enforcement, but in a different way, one she believed could make a real difference. Back in the present, standing before the tense scene in the courthouse, Madeline knew those memories had forged her strength. She was not only a leader, but a symbol of crushed dreams of those denied justice simply because of their skin color. Do you know, every time Madeline looks in the mirror, she doesn't just see herself. She sees millions of black children yearning for a fairer future. And she knows this fight is not hers alone, but ours all. The story is far from over. We will continue alongside Madeline, facing new challenges, taking meaningful steps to change a system that has lasted too long. Follow me to explore the next chapters of this inspiring journey. The hearing took place in a small courthouse room, cold white lights illuminating everywhere, creating a heavy, tense atmosphere. Before the investigation committee, Ethan Cole stood straight, his voice trying to remain calm but clearly defensive. "I did not intend to offend anyone. My job is full of pressure. Every day, facing danger, I have to make split-second decisions." Ethan glanced around, avoiding the sharp gaze of Madeline Brooks, who sat opposite him. "I have served this city for over 15 years, and I believe I've done my best." Some committee members nodded, showing sympathy for the frontline police's pressure. Madeline stood step to the microphone. She looked straight at Ethan, her gaze neither weak nor fading, but full of strength and determination. You are not forgiven, not because I am the police chief, but because I know my rights, because I did not stay silent when those rights were violated. All eyes in the hearing room focused on Madeline. She continued, voice clear and unyielding. You may speak of job pressure, but that's no excuse to cross the limits of law and dignity. A committee member asked Ethan, do you think your behavior aligns with professional ethics? Ethan hesitated in reply. I think I did what was necessary to maintain order. Madeline smiled faintly, then said, order is not maintained by hurting others, but by respecting their rights and dignity. The confrontation was not just between two people, but a battle between two different systems, one of law, fairness, and understanding, the other of abused power, prejudice, and internal protection. Ethan stood there knowing well this hearing could be a turning point in his career. Madeline remained steadfast, fighting not only for herself, but for millions of oppressed people without a voice. As the hearing ended, Madeline looked back at Ethan, her eyes full of challenge, but also carrying a message. Justice is not a privilege. It is a responsibility, and it belongs to all of us. Can you feel that tension? The confrontation, not only in words, but in every glance, every breath. It is the voice of a society craving change. And the story of Madeline and Ethan has only just begun. Follow along as we step into the next chapter where truth and justice will be tested more fiercely than ever before. Madeline Brooks returned to her police chief office on a gentle, sunny morning. She walked through familiar corridors, but now each step was not just a leader's journey, but a symbol of change and hope for the community. Many in the police department and society now looked at her differently, not just as an officer or chief, but as a strong voice against injustice, a constant reminder of everyone's responsibility in society. A close colleague gently said to her, Madeline, you don't just lead the team, you lead everyone's hearts. Madeline smiled, her eyes tinged with sadness, but full of resolve. I'm just the first to step forward, but everyone will be the ones to walk beside me. Now, standing before you, the listener of this story, I want to ask, when you witness injustice, what will you do? Will you turn away, avoid it, or will you courageously speak out, record, and become part of the change? Do you realize that power doesn't lie in a badge or handcuffs, but in you, the one willing not to stay silent? Madeline chose not to stay silent. She bravely stood up to power, and now she is living proof of that. But the story is not hers alone. It belongs to all of us. You, the one listening now, could be the next to keep the flame of justice burning bright. And if you want to join me in telling more stories that cannot be silenced, hit follow on this channel. Together, we will turn small voices into unstoppable strength. Finally, I want to leave you with this thought. What does true power really mean? Is it the right to impose, or the responsibility to uphold fairness and dignity for all? Remember, if you choose silence, you may not see it, but injustice will persist. And in that darkness, one day you might be the one denied your rights. Don't let power blind you. Let it awaken you and be the one to speak out. Thank you for listening. See you in the next stories.